Hello and welcome back. This is Paolo, your host. This is Conversations in Artificial Intelligence, and it is a great honor and privilege to have you here today. So today we're going to go and look again into the marketing realm, and particularly we're going to look at how artificial intelligence is sensibly innovating in the field of content marketing. This is something that is extremely relevant to a large part of the digital world. So stay tuned and let's go ahead and introduce our host today. So Tom Wilson, who is the CTO of Concured and is with us from Montreal in Canada. How are you, Tom?
Very well, thank you, Paolo. Thank you first very much for this interview opportunity and as well for your initiatives in sharing this content and this knowledge around the world.
Thank you. It's a pleasure having you here. And your rise into AI has been kind of a unique path. Tell us, how did you get into AI?
Well, it's been a long path. In fact, I started back in 1998, 1999, in the final year of my master's degree at Oxford University in the UK, where I was studying under Professor Lionel Tarasenko, as well as Professor Andrew Zisman, who are now quite well known in the field. Well, they were well known at the time, but now they're really highly respected. So this was my first taste of it. A few years into my professional career, I decided it was something I would like to do professionally. And I was actually, in 2002, 2003, I was looking for opportunities to work in AI. And it will sound amazing to hear this today in 2019. But at that time, I couldn't find a single company that was interested in working on artificial intelligence and was hiring at the time. Most of the companies that I found that had some kind of AI credibility or AI-related work were surviving from government grants or research projects or working closely with the universities. But there was very little industrial application of that kind of work. So fast forward to 2016, the year I moved to Montreal from Vienna, Austria. And I was amazed to find on arriving here that Montreal is now the center point of deep learning and some of the latest AI technologies. And so I was recruited at that time to work as CTO of Concured. And it was interesting to be in the opposite situation of looking to hire people who could work in my team as machine learning experts or AI developers, and to find that there was too many people who were looking for these positions, and even more companies who were prepared to hire them. So there was actually a scarcity of talent available to work in my team. So it was a really an inverse situation from what I experienced when I was in the job market back in 2003.
Let's say focused on what you do today. And today you work in the field of digital advertising. And just to make it clear to our audience, we're looking at the field where Facebook and Google combined together, I think, make more than 150 to 180 billion dollars. So pretty significant market. And then there is all the rest. So what is the status of digital advertising today?
There's too much noise. There are too many signals striving for our attention. We live in this attention economy, and there's only a certain amount of attention budget that every single human being has. And that budget has pretty much been saturated and oversaturated with the volume of content that is being hurled at us by advertisers. If you just think of the word advertiser and the kind of connotations and the associations that people have with this word, it's not something that you really want to receive. It's almost like a pest. The association that people have is a bit like overly pushy salespeople trying to force their foot into your door and to tell you about things you don't want to know. So there's a third factor here, which is the customer acquisition costs. And particularly with B2B and software as a service businesses, where you have a subscription basis in many cases, you're under pressure to constantly keep your customers happy so that you can extend the lifetime value as long as possible and continue to earn money from your customers as long as possible. However, that has to be balanced with the costs of customer acquisition, the so-called CAC, customer acquisition costs. And if the customer acquisition costs are too high compared to the customer lifetime value, then you don't have a business. So the bad news here is that customer acquisition costs have gone up in SaaS businesses by 70% in just over the last 5 years. This means it's becoming more expensive to acquire new customers. At the same time, those customers are bombarded with other opportunities where they could spend their money. So on a subscription, they can stop anytime and move over to another provider who's undercutting you. So there needs to be a way to reach customers or potential customers in a way that's less expensive and less intrusive. And this is where content marketing comes in. It is the content, it's the blog posts, thought leadership articles, what else is it? Videos, infographics, podcasts, none of which are trying to sell you anything. They are trying to build an audience of people who may or may not be interested in your product or service somewhere in the future. And you're not trying to sell them anything. You're trying to provide your audience, like a publisher, with material that they find entertaining, informative, educational, interesting, etc., in order that they actually opt in to giving you their attention. This is the only way to get people's real attention. And this form of content marketing, as it's known today, used to be called native advertising, changed its name every few decades, is now when done well, is the most cost-effective form of lead acquisition and marketing, digital marketing available to enterprises.
First, summarize a little bit here the trends. So we have a couple of trends basically. One is people are overloaded with information, so their attention is decreasing. Therefore, cost of acquisitions are increasing from that side of the equation, but also they increasing because of there is more competition and the amount of advertising real estate is more or less limited. And so that's kind of the problem. And so content marketing is a viable opportunity for B2B companies. But here's the thing, how does content market really plays a role in a world where we also are overwhelmed with content?
There's only a certain amount of time in the day or a certain amount of attention that we have in order to consume content. So where's that content going to come from? It's a budget, it's a diet, if you like. You can only have a certain amount of, let's say, entertainment plus a certain amount of educational material, a certain amount of news, perhaps a certain amount of industry-related content that's necessary for you to stay up to date in your field. And you have to manage that budget or that diet. Yeah, how do we fill up that budget or meal plan that we have with content? And the answer is to be the best or nearly the best and producing content that is on topics that are relevant, interesting, and timely, and in the right way to the audience that you're trying to reach.
So, Tom, basically summarizing, you're saying that the quality of content is basically the key to attract the attention. And if done properly, this will result into creating a rapport with the potential customer that is in your audience. But what is the mechanics of distributing this content?
So you're a big brand and you have created some interesting blog posts. You've created maybe some PDFs of, let's say, in-depth articles about the best way to invest in Ethereum or a cryptocurrency. And how do you get this in front of the people you want to see it? There are a few ways. Obviously, the simplest, put it on your website. Ideally, if you have a newsletter, you can refer back to this. And so you put links in the newsletter for the articles that you have available on your website. You can, as you mentioned, distribute it on social media, either simply on your LinkedIn and Twitter feed and your Facebook homepage. You can put it out there and hope that people will see it and then distribute it further organically through their networks. Then there's the next option, which is, again, something you referred to, which is to pay to be promoted in this way. And that's potentially putting it in front of people who are not following your company specifically, but are seen to have some kind of affinity with the product or service that you're trying to sell. So you're essentially buying an audience and you're able to put things in front of them. That's actually kind of similar to the traditional paper-published newspaper or magazine model, in the sense that there is real estate available to sell to the people who are wishing to get their advertisements alongside the content that the readers of that newspaper or magazine are consuming. Okay, but in this case, you can now, in the digital age, as you've mentioned, you can pay to promote that, and the more you pay, the more eyeballs you get, and that's great if the audience is relevant for you. And it is, however, it is an auction, and as we know, with every auction, the price gets pushed up to the level where it only just about becomes viable for the person bidding in that auction. So that means that essentially the most efficient or cost-efficient or cost-cutting businesses will be able to afford to have the maximum placement on those social channels. But then there are other channels. So I'm sure you've read these online newspapers or other publishers where you see on the side of the page additional content that's not by the publisher that you're reading. So you might be reading the New York Times, and there'll be a bar of content, or perhaps a horizontal bar with a few different articles from other sources. And these will say maybe posted by, and this would be some arbitrage company that gets them there. And if you click on one of those, you'll be taken to a different site. You'll be taken to I'm going to make up an example. You're on the New York Times. You're looking on the travel section. You've been identified as a reader who may be interested in travel, and you may see an article, sponsored article saying, 5 ways to improve your foreign languages skills by the producer of an app for language learning. And so you would be taken to their website. You'd read that post that is on the website, and then you'd suddenly ask yourself, hey, how did I end up here? I thought I was reading the New York Times. If it's something you're interested in, you might think, I'll stay here and maybe read a few more articles and possibly sign up for the newsletter. Or maybe I'll take that free trial that they're offering me with the little pop-up on the screen, because I've now read 3 articles and they can see that I'm actually kind of interested in improving my language skills. So these are all different ways of promoting your content once you've actually created it. But the number one question on every content marketer's mind is, what should I create content on that is topically interesting to my target audience, that is timely in the sense that, why now? It's, something that they may be interested in this month or next month, or but perhaps not last month. You might think about creating content that's going to be generating additional views and additional interest for years to come, or so-called evergreen content that is not trying to catch the wave of any trend or news story. And then the third part is, of course, the quality of that content, which you referred to before.
So we have seen so far that content marketing, especially in the B2B sector, is a powerful way to decrease the cost of acquisition. We have seen that there are alternatives, channels for distributing this content, but really the problem is, what do I talk about, when to talk about it, and how good is what am I doing?
Here the challenge is to know what is interesting to your audience. And for this, we can quite happily and reliably use social engagements on content from multiple sources that have the similar kind of target audience as you're trying to reach, and see which articles, blog posts, videos, etc., are most resonating, getting the most shares, with shares, likes, tweets, etc., with those audiences. So content from maybe the same industry, so-called contextual publishers, or lookalike, that have lookalike audiences, and to mine that content at scale, to understand not only which individual pieces are working well, but which topics are working well across large quantities of content published recently. So we can quite happily see, by using the latest techniques in natural language processing, what topic or topics each piece of content is about, and we can infer that from the content, and we can correlate that against all of these social engagement metrics to see actually which topics are being written about, in what frequency or in what volumes they're being written about, and at the same time, which of those topics are resonating the most. So by understanding the ones that are performing relatively well compared to the amount that they've been written about or spoken about, we can make recommendations, or our platform can make recommendations on the content opportunities for the topics that are most interesting. So, of course, here we need to look at time series of topic engagement and content created on topics across a certain time period, whether it's a year or 2 years, to see the trends or to see whether a topic is engaging increasingly with time, or whether a topic is saturated in the sense that a lot of content has been created on it. And so the chances of you getting your piece of content or getting somebody's attention to read your piece of content is quite low. This is actually the trap that many content marketers make, which is to wait until something is plateaued before creating more content on it. And at that point, they've kind of missed the opportunity. They've missed the tide because it takes a long time as humans to kind of spot the trends. And often it's after it's actually happened that people realize. So the other part is how to write about them. And here there are many tools that will analyze the content for style, for consistency of level in terms of the reader that you're trying to reach. Is it a sophisticated, highly literate reader, or is it somebody with a lower level of education or a lower level of sophistication? Is it somebody who already knows quite a lot about the thing that you're talking about? So do you have to? Are you jumping into the deep end, or are you starting right at the beginning of the story and explaining it from the simplest part and then going into further detail? And then there's the question of adding in the keywords, which specific keywords. This is really the game of search engine optimization. Not really something that Concured does much of, but there are many tools for helping customers to brands to put the right words into their content in order to rank higher on search engines.
So where does, if you like, machine learning performs the best, or if you like, how do you go about understanding what is tangibly better after use of machine learning in these various fields, that you can say, even to your customers, these are the tangible measures?
But there are really a few factors that one has to consider from a business side. One is time saved. Can we automate some of the tasks that may take too long or simply be unfeasible by humans, such as reading huge quantities of text and cross-correlating those against metrics that may be placed in different parts of the internet and that need to be automated in order to be feasible. The second part related to that is just the amount of time it takes to get from starting that research process to finishing the research process. So, if we were to think of a kind of computing analogy, if you could parallelize that with people and get the result back very fast, so that you can act on that recommendation or the information presented to you, that would be a business advantage. So, regardless of the cost, just the amount of time it takes for you to from start to finish, the latency between a topic being an opportunity and that topic being published versus the opportunity being there, and then let's say the rest of your competitors filling that space before you've reached it. This greatly affects the performance of your content and ultimately your return on investment. And the third part of it is, of course, not just about time saving and about latency and time to market, but also the aspect of the quality, the KPIs that you measure yourself on as a company. So these are typically looking at the sales funnel and the marketing stack. One could say the number of social engagements you get on the different social channels. You could say higher numbers are better. Perhaps we care more about LinkedIn than we do about Facebook, or perhaps we care more about Instagram because we're that kind of business. So whatever you choose to be your social engagement metric of choice. Then, of course, there are page views on your website. There's the time spent on your website, and I won't go too deep statistics that marketers tend to look at. But let me look a little bit more at the kind of sales funnel. You can think about repeat visits from the same customers, which topics they look at as they go through the buying journey, from not really knowing what they're looking for, or perhaps just browsing at the start, to perhaps looking for a bit more information, and then being in the middle of the funnel and starting to gather information, and then finally giving customers the information they need at the point where they've decided that they wanted to buy something of this kind, and to then present them with the information they would need in order to make an informed decision as to which vendor they should go to. So at every stage, there are metrics and statistics that one could look at and measure, and many companies are different, and ultimately, sales are the thing that companies will care about. But it can be a very long journey from that first piece of content being published to a sale being made, and it's very hard to do all of the attribution stages in between to understand. So it's probably sufficient just to look at social engagements and to look at page views to understand whether let's say the marketing part of the journey has been fulfilled. One could go deeper on the sales part, but this is probably not the time.
So in your experience, do you have developed a recipe, if you like, to keep under control all these different stages? So the individual task level, the synergic work from, if you like, a functional perspective, and then maybe everything is working, but it doesn't have a really business impact. Have you worked it out, or have you worked it, or do you have an opinion on how to put these things together?
What I can say is that this is a business that works with humans and creative individuals, and there's one side of the business which is not our business, but that of our customers, brands who are looking to create content. So there's a creative aspect there that is very hard to quantify, to measure, and then there's another side of it, which is the analytics. Our clients fall into one of two camps. They tend to be either more creative driven, more about brainstorming and more about having good ideas and evaluating those ideas and then creating interesting content on that. And then there's the other type who tend to be just in the numbers, and they're looking at all the statistics. They're looking at what went up compared to last month, which social channels did they perform best on. If they're looking at publishing content on a particular topic, where should they pay to promote that? Which social channel? Which distribution partner should they work with? We've tried to provide tools to both types of customer. So is there a magic recipe? I'm afraid not.
So, I had to ask. I kind of expected it, but that's also a challenging problem. And I want to just make this comment. In organization, this problem of kind of measuring the outcome is not only a problem with the vendors, but it's also a problem inside organizations, because it's not clear how management can control and can invest. So the larger the organization, the more they are reliant on KPIs and things of this sort, the more difficult it becomes to handle processes like this that have a variety of indicators, if you like, and then it's difficult to quantify their cooperative interactions. So, but with that said, what I want to do now is, we have established that artificial intelligence is getting into content marketing and is getting into the way of helping the marketers to identifying what to write, when to write, whether they're writing something that is good enough, probably also helping somehow in the distribution, when to send the email and so on and so forth. Why was this not possible 5 years ago? Why we're seeing so many startups in the field today?
Well, there were some advances in AI, breakthroughs, I would say, even in the early part of this decade. Improvements in speech detection, understanding, so for voice transcription, as well as for computer vision, understanding what's in images, in videos, and some of the techniques that we used in order to kind of crack those two problems that have been really on the table for a long time for researchers, with let's say ever decreasing returns on researcher time. The breakthroughs led to much higher performances, and they could be applied to some other techniques. and namely natural language processing, which has been around for a very long time. There are many algorithms, even stemming back to the 1950s, that are still in use today. But the advent of deep learning and some of the related technologies, encoder, decoder, frame structures, as well as generative adversarial models, have been applied to natural language processing and have enabled topic understanding on a level that was not possible or, let's say, economically feasible in the early part of this decade.
So you're seeing the algorithm ability to understand the meaning of what's inside the content as a crucial element, more so than, let's say, things like more computational power, more storage power, the cost of storage going down so you can crawl more and so on. So in your opinion, the core contribution in your field, in this field, is the ability to understand the content better in a more cognitive way, if you like.
That's what I would say. In many other fields, simply the amount of data that's been collected has been the game changer, or possibly in combination with other factors such as the readily available, highly powerful graphical processing units, GPUs, as well as cloud computing opportunities that allow us to spin up very intensive computational processes for brief periods of time. These have all helped in the field that we work in, as we use much published content in the public domain. I think the content has always been there, so the game changer has been the algorithms and the ability to understand things on a topic level.
So if you look at what has happened in the last 5 years, we have seen an increase of video over other type of contents on the internet that has been exponential. So where is, in your opinion, the technology and also the startup offering out there when we look at the dimension of the type of content?
Well, there's a lot of experimentation on the part of enterprise and brands, in the sense that I suppose when the social networks became a new thing, when was that, a decade ago? Companies were trying to figure out, where is the best place to use our resources. We only have a certain amount of budget in our team, certain amount of hours per day that we can get useful work done. Where should we expend our energy? Should it be on Facebook? Should it be on Twitter? Should we be creating content for a blog post? And so the answer, especially for young companies or companies with limited resources, is to think about which one gives the highest return on investment within the appropriate time period. And for some companies, that won't be content marketing. For some companies, it will be simply paid advertising to get a lot of eyeballs quickly. But in the field of content marketing, the critical thing here is to understand the audience you're trying to target, to understand what actually interests them, as opposed to talking about your company or talking about your products or your services. There's a huge bias for companies to boast about their successes, but this really isn't normally very interesting to their customers. So you really have to listen to the customer, understand what's interesting for them, and then create content on that. Whether it's video, podcasts, blog posts, long-form articles, you have to experiment with all of it and find out which one is the most rewarding for you. All I would say is that video is expensive to produce professionally, and I'm sure any young company that's tried that will probably find that it's not suitable for their budget.
What I like to also see is, from a technological standpoint, the ability to understand language, text, audio, video, and all this many content can be found in one single company.
So we are primarily focused on text, but we also do cover video. So from the video, we're extracting the audio component using speech to text and then treating that like text. So we're, at the end for us, everything is text. Whether it's an infographic, we can use OCR. Again, take out the text, work out what the keywords are, and then feed them into our regular text processing algorithms. Podcasts, something that we would love to do. We have this in our pipeline. It's ready to go. We haven't had any interest from our clients or potential clients yet to actually activate this. So like any business, we only will take action and build features out fully when somebody's prepared to pay for them.
Where is this type of technology going? Do you think that the current approach of converting everything down to text is going to be winning in the future, or we're going to see more? If you look at the two dimensions, so like getting the algorithms to understand the text better, that can be one dimension. The other dimension can be getting algorithm understanding context better. So if you look at these two dimensions, where do you think we're going to be in the next 5 years?
Well, certainly the big companies, as well as some small specialized companies in technology, provide, let's say, video analysis as a service simply via API. So you send a URL or you send the full form of a video, and you'll get back a kind of transcription on a frame by frame or shot by shot basis of what was going on in there semantically, which is not based on the text. It's not based on any text in the images. It's not based on the audio component on its own. It's a kind of a semantic understanding of the images and the video context. Similarly, within infographics, you can apply the same technique, but just on a static frame. So you can look at the image and try to figure out what it's about and describe that in words. And that technology exists. I wouldn't advise small companies or even medium-sized companies to try to build this kind of stuff themselves. It's way too specialized. But what you can do is integrate it into your products using third-party services.
How there is this topic of trusting the AI black box versus do not trust it. What is your viewpoint on this?
The right person to ask ultimately is the customer, because they're the ones who use it, and they've answered this question for us already. And this has actually greatly influenced our product development. So initially we thought it would be sufficient to provide the black box answers. Do this, publish this much, write about this topic. This topic's doing well. This old content that you created last year, you should distribute this again because that topic is back in fashion. As it turns out, anybody with a marketing budget, doesn't want to know just what they should do, but also why they should do it. So I would say a lot of our efforts over the past year have been to kind of take that pyramid, whether at the top of the pyramid is the decision or the recommendation, and to allow the customer to go down every level that led to that decision, so they can validate it themselves. We can, at the bottom of that of that hierarchy or the pyramid, our client can see every piece of content that was created by their competitors or by publishers in their industry that had performed well on that topic within what time frame. And so they can validate and they can see with their own eyes the evidence that they would need themselves in order to reach the same conclusion. So we see our product more as a decision support system that takes away a lot of the legwork or the hard manual labor distilling those insights, but at the same time, we provide access to the raw data that led to those insights. And in many or perhaps even all cases, we think a content marketer or content marketing strategist would come to the same conclusion.
Before we close, one very, very last question. Somebody starting now is an engineer. He wants to become the CTO of an AI startup, and what he should do?
The job of the CTO is to be the orchestrator. Anybody who works with containers and Docker and Kubernetes will perhaps like that analogy. So to perhaps orchestrate the processes rather than to be the process itself. So to understand all of the considerations, whether it's the technology or whether it's the product roadmap, or whether it's the marketing considerations, whether it's factors that I've talked about so far, like customer acquisition costs and lifetime value, as well as other, let's say, more general business-related activities such as finance. So to have, let's say, a deep foundation in one area of technology, but to be broad as well in technology, and to have those other skills that are needed to understand a business. Because ultimately, the decisions made by the CTO with his or her team are based not only on technical factors, but also on building a product that is useful to enough customers and generating enough margin in order to create a sustainable business, happy employees, happy customers, and make the world a better place.
Very good. So, Tom, it's a pleasure having you here. So, for our audience, if you are interested in these topics and wants to ask questions, please comment below. And if you have additional suggestions, please reach out to me. And Tom, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much for being here today.
Likewise, a pleasure. Thank you, Paolo.